want to thank everybody for attending. Again, so we are here with Janet Zahn and Sarah Mitchell from Kennari Consulting. My name is Troy Baker with the BBB Educational Foundation, and I will start by handing it over to Janet and Sarah.
Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. My name is Janet Zahn, and I'm a campaign director at Kennari Consulting, which means I primarily work with our clients who are working on either capital or endowment or some sort of a campaign, but I also help with board development and other things as well. And my colleague Sarah, who will be joining in on part of the presentation, is a project manager and does a lot of work with messaging and writing for our clients. In introduction to this presentation, we really want to just start out by acknowledging what's the current situation and how is our community responding. Now, none of us have been through a pandemic before. It's all of our first time in this crazy ride that we're on, and it's a situation that is rapidly changing. But what we can say is that the funding community, individual donors, and the government are all looking into how they can help. All of the organizations have been impacted in some way or another, and I know that many of you, maybe most, have applied for the payroll protection and are out there getting some resources. So things are happening, and that current focus on immediate needs is starting to that's going to remain, I guess, but is also starting to lessen, and opportunities for organizations that don't do only essential needs work are being able to access some funding as well. The new normal, I don't know if we want to call this normal, but we've been working at home for several weeks now, most of us, and we've kind of adjusted into what that means. Okay, I've got my workspace, I'm getting the Zoom technology or webinars or whatever tools you're using to maintain your productivity. We've kind of gotten into a little bit of a rhythm, and so we're able to be a bit more productive than maybe those first couple of weeks where it was mostly just feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. And then the three things that donors want to hear, and hopefully you've been sharing with them, but really they're the same things that we all want to know when things get crazy. You know, how are you impacted? Are you okay? You know, your donors want to know, how has this pandemic impacted your organization specifically? Are you okay? And then what are you doing to respond? How are you changing your programming delivery, or what is happening and what your response to it has been? And then the third thing is, how can they help? They really want you to be, if they are a donor who loves your organization, they want to be able to support you. So remember, really, it's about your patrons, clients, stakeholders, and members. And then what we're covering today is communication with annual and campaign donors during the COVID-19 situation. So specifically, we're talking about the pandemic and the situation we're in right now, but we're also going to talk a little bit about other unexpected challenges that rise, particularly changes in leadership or campaign troubles. And then we're also going to talk about communicating with internal audiences. And the one thing I guess I would say is direct outreach wherever possible is really important, no matter who you're talking to. Ask how they are too. And then I'm going to hand it over to Sarah to take you through the next few slides.
All right, well, hello everyone. So this is a video that came from Marriott Hotels, and it's a video that the CEO there shared with, it was made for an internal audience, so for staff and the teams at the Marriott Hotels across the world. And it was talking about the situation and how it was impacting their organization. And the reason that we chose a for-profit example is there are elements to that communication, that video communication, that really transcend industry. And as we think about, your communications and strong communications in this time in general, there were elements of that that were really relevant that we want to be thinking about how those fit into our communications right now.
Hello, Marriott Associates. I'm here to give you an update on the impact of coronavirus, or COVID-19, on our business and the steps we're taking to respond to it. Because of the profound impact COVID-19 is having on so many of us around the world, this is the most difficult video message we have ever pulled together. Our team was a bit concerned about using a video today because of my new bald look. Let me just say that my new look is exactly what was expected as a result of my medical treatments. I feel good, and my team and I are 100% focused on overcoming the common crisis we face. Now let's talk about that crisis, COVID-19. Let's start with the health challenge itself. Across our company, the number of COVID-19 infected associates is low, and I'm grateful for this. I want to acknowledge the associates who are dealing with it as a patient, a parent, family member, or friend, and the hundreds of Marriott colleagues who are at this minute quarantined. Our well wishes and thoughts are with all of you. In terms of our business, COVID-19 is like nothing we've ever seen before. For a company that's 92 years old, that's borne witness to the Great Depression, World War II, and many other economic and global crises, that's saying something. But here are the facts. COVID-19 is having a more severe and sudden financial impact on our business than 9/11 and the 2009 financial crisis combined. The worst quarter we had in those earlier crises saw a roughly 25% decline in hotel revenues on average across the globe. In this case, which began in Greater China in January, we quickly saw a 90% decline in our business in China. In the 2 months since, we have seen COVID-19 extend to the rest of the world. In most markets, our business is already running 75% below normal levels. The principal challenge we face is obvious. Governments all around the world are taking the steps to contain COVID-19. The restrictions on travel, gatherings of people, and required social distancing is having an immediate impact by depressing demand for our hotels. As a result, we have hotels around the world that can't operate without incurring substantial economic losses and risking permanently their ability to reopen when this gets behind us. This has caused hundreds of hotels to close or start the process of closing until such time as demand begins to return. Given these circumstances, we've been forced to take proactive steps to respond to the crisis and are putting into place business contingency plans globally. While pieces of these continent contingency plans vary, given the differences in local laws and the geographies where we operate, certain elements are universal. We've worked to take controllable costs out of the business, like suspending all non-essential travel. We have paused all new hires, with the exception of a small number of mission-critical positions. We have stopped all hotel initiatives for 2020 and have gone dark on our brand marketing and advertising during this period. Both Mr. Marriott and I will not be taking any salary for the balance of 2020, and my executive team will be taking a 50% cut in pay. Above property around the world, we are moving to shortened work weeks, and in the U.S., we are also putting in place temporary leaves for at least the next 60 to 90 days that will impact most associates at our headquarters and above property locations. At the property level, contingency plans vary by geography and hotel occupancy rates, but for open hotels include closing food and beverage outlets, reducing staff, and closing floors of hotels. More details about these actions and what they mean will be shared through local HR teams. If there is any good news visible today, it is the signs of early recovery in Greater China. China appears to have succeeded in reducing the spread of COVID-19 through strong counteractions. China is now bringing manufacturing back online, and we are seeing some early signs of lodging demand begin to return. If this holds, it may bode well for the course of this epidemic in other parts of the world. In 2 weeks, I will mark my 8th anniversary as CEO, a position I accepted on the heels of 2 legends in hospitality. As a leader, I've experienced so many wonderful highs and a good number of challenging lows. I can tell you that I have never had a more difficult moment than this one. There is simply nothing worse than telling highly valued associates, people who are the very heart of this company, that their roles are being impacted by events completely outside of their control. I've never been more determined to see us through than I am at this moment. While it's impossible to know how long this crisis will last, I know we as a global community will come through the other side, and that when we do, our guests will be eager to travel this beautiful world again. When that great day comes, we will be there to welcome them with the warmth and care we are known for the world over. As I close, I encourage you to please take care of yourself, your friends and family, and the community around you. I wish you good health and a sense of optimism. Together, we can and we will overcome this, and we'll thrive once again. Thank you, and be well.
It is a really good example of a video communication. So to start, when he starts the video, he really finds the right balance between the seriousness of the situation without sounding reactionary or alarmist. And that is really something in all of our communications that we want to strive for, is achieving that balance. This is a very serious time. This is a very challenging time. And it's important to, constantly talk about that. But it's also important to make sure that our responses and our communications are measured and not reactionary. It gives people much more confidence in us when we are able to find that balance. So that's an important element, and it's something that we see in this video. The other thing that he makes reference to, and this is specific to this video and this situation, but I think that there could be circumstances like this that organizations are facing. So the CEO references his own personal health challenges. He appears in the video and he's bald, and he references that. And he talks about how that's a result of his own health treatments. I'm assuming that he potentially is going through treatment for cancer. So the reason that you would call something like that out in a video like that is he wants to be really upfront and direct and eliminate any concern that the leadership is able to lead through this time. So generally that's not something that you would call out, but this is a time for a lot of transparency and a lot of direct communication. If there's a reason that people might be worried about, the leadership or who's kind of making the decisions right now, it's better to respond to that directly than to allow those concerns to permeate. And then the next thing that he does is they talk about, as he starts to talk about the situation, he leads with the human impact before he steps into the economic impact. So he is talking about the impact of this on the health of staff, people who may be sick themselves or have family members or loved ones who are sick. It's really important. Obviously, the economic impact of the situation is huge. It's affecting, I'm sure, all of you in some way, personally and in your organization. But obviously, when we're looking at those side by side, that human impact is really where we want to start the focus. And just like Janet said, we want to be asking people how they are. We want to be talking about how we're keeping our people safe, or how our hearts are with the people who are struggling with this before we start to talk about the economic impact. It's really important when we're showing those things side by side that the human impact is what gets the priority there. So the next thing that he goes into is, again, he's very direct about the scope of the challenge, and he gives some very specific examples about the economic impact of this on Marriott as an organization. Now, this is an internal communication, so there is going to be some more specific and some more information that he is sharing with this than you would potentially be sharing with an external audience. So like we mentioned in the start, we are going to talk about those internal communications, and there is a little bit of difference between those two. Obviously, we want to let people know that there is an impact. We have, maybe it's affected your programming, you've had to shut your doors. Obviously, there is a revenue impact to that. But we will be balancing, the audience with how much detail we go into about that. And another thing to recognize is, even though this was filmed for an internal audience, obviously it has since been shared externally. So there's always a chance when you create a video that it will be shared beyond just who it's directed at. So that's something to think about when you're making a video, even if it is for an internal audience. Just think about how much you're sharing. We still want to share what the full scope of that impact is, but just be sensitive about how much specific maybe revenue and finance information that you're sharing. The next thing that he does in the video is he lays out their plan. So they have a very specific, detailed plan for how they're going to mitigate the challenging times. And it's important, obviously, everything is rapidly changing. So when we lay out a plan, that plan may change, but it's important for us to share with our donors, with our stakeholders, that we have a plan and this is what it looks like. It doesn't mean that we might not have to deviate from the plan in the future if things change in a way that's unexpected, but it's important to share with our stakeholders, we have a plan and this is what it is. And then lastly, he ends on a positive note, or a hopeful note, I'd say. Just like in the beginning, finding that right balance between the seriousness of the situation while still signaling confidence to who you're communicating with is important. So he starts on that note, he ends on that note, and that's really the balance that we want to find in our communications. So, and a couple more things on this slide before we move on from the video. We've seen great examples, from our local nonprofit community of people putting out videos right now. I think that there's a lot of ingenuity that's happening right now because people are having to respond in a different way. But when we talk about video, generally we're talking about something where we're bringing in a videographer, and a lot of times there's a pretty significant cost to that. Right now, the videos that we're seeing are cell phone videos, iPad videos. People are making it work at home. And I think that that's very genuine, and it really speaks to the moment right now. People want to hear from you, and it's okay if that's going to look a little bit more raw and not as produced. So I actually think that that's a real strength right now. Okay, so as we think about what our communications look like, the first thing is, and obviously most of you have probably done some of this already, but the situation is still ongoing, and so it's important for us to continually be assessing the situation. So how has this particular pandemic, how has COVID-19 affected your programming? How has it impacted your fundraising strategy that was planned? So maybe you've had events that you've had to or are considering changing because of this, appeals that would have generally gone out at this time, things that are generally bringing in revenue that you're having to think about how this is affecting them. And then, like we started off with, potentially capital campaigns, whether that's something that you've planned or is ongoing. So as we look at your programming and communicating about that, what your programming looks like right now should drive what your communications look like right now. So if you are an organization that is already, meeting critical needs in the community, that's just what you do already. Likely, maybe your programming has ramped up, or you've had to find some new ways to serve your community and the people that you serve. But your messaging can really continue to be pretty broad, in terms of sharing things on social media, in terms of sending things out to your entire database. The focus right now from the community, from the donor community, is really on how do we help address those critical needs. So if that is the space that your organization is already in, or if you've stepped into that space, if you are starting to serve your population in a different way because you recognize that that's what they need right now, those communications can be more broad. But if you're not, if you're an organization where maybe you've had to close your doors, or you can't offer your programming because it brings people together, and we can't do that right now, then it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be communicating with your donors or with your stakeholders, but those communications should be segmented and targeted. So right now, instead of mass messages, that you're sending out across your database, or appeals that are just kind of what you had planned, you should really be communicating with your top loyal donors, the people who support you year after year. They want to hear from you, and they want to make sure that you're okay after this, and they understand that you have those operational needs. So your messaging should be really focused on, here's what we need to keep moving forward to make sure that when we can reopen our doors, that we're prepared to do that. And talking with those top donors, those people who are they want to make sure you're okay. That's really the strategy that you should be utilizing right now. And those conversations, they really could be through email. They could be phone calls, picking up the phone and talking to people right now. So they're much more personal messages. And really that's just because of the volume of messaging that everyone is getting right now anyway. It is just such an overwhelming amount that we really want those critical needs organizations to be able to share their messaging broadly. And then the rest of the organizations, they want to be really strategic about who they're communicating with right now and how. Now, events are a big one. So a lot of you may be in a situation where you have already had to shift an event, or you have one that's upcoming and you're thinking about what that looks like. Obviously, we have seen a lot of events that have moved online. So that's something, before you were to cancel an event, obviously looking at other formats that you could potentially have that in, or postponing would be our recommendation before you cancel outright. So still trying to have some opportunity to engage with your donors, with prospects, is going to be a good opportunity before it's just canceled for the year. But there's some things that you have to think about. So with an online format, if you are an organization that your donor universe is used to hearing from you online, so they're used to getting emails from you, they're used to interacting with you on social media, you have pretty good engagement on social media, pretty good following, then likely you could move to an online format and that could be pretty successful. If you're not in that space, if you just really don't have that kind of communication with your donors, or your donors don't really respond to that from you very well, it might be better to look at postponing, if it's possible to push it into the fall, versus trying to host something online and maybe people not really responding to that because it's just not how they're used to interacting with you. So those are the things to evaluate, as you're thinking about potentially moving to an online format or postponing. And then for those events that do move online, communicating with sponsors and donors is really critical, and particularly with sponsors, having a strategy for those sponsors, a recognition strategy that even goes beyond what you would do if it was an in-person event, is really important. So our sponsors are not going to have, the recognition is not going to have that same impact that it would have had in person. So we want to develop really to take every opportunity to recognize our sponsors if we're moving to some sort of online format, and to share that with them. So you put together your strategy. Here's all the ways that we plan to, in the communications leading up to the event, during the event, in the follow-up, on our website, on our social media platforms. Here's the ways that we plan to recognize our sponsors, and sharing that with them so that they feel really good about their contribution and they feel like you're still recognizing them and you still appreciate that support. So we want to use even more opportunities to recognize them than we would if we would have been having it in person. Same with donors. We want to be talking with our donors early and often. So if you're still in the process maybe of making a change to an event that was planned in upcoming months, but you feel like it's not going to happen as you had planned, you should be communicating with those donors now. So even if you don't have the exact plan yet, let them know, hey, we're looking into this. We still want to have something, and we'll let you know as soon as we have that plan in place. We really want you to be a part of it. So letting them know even before you have the exact plan, and then once you do, reaching back out, and inviting them to be a part of that, but making sure that you're communicating with them often so that they know that something's happening. The other thing to think about with events is if you have somebody, if that's the event that triggers somebody's giving, You really want to be very targeted in how you're communicating with those donors who have given to those events in the past. So if you're planning on moving an event online, there is some benefit to that. Obviously, you can extend that. You can share that with a much broader group of people than just the people that would be coming to an event and possibly paying for an event. So there is some real benefit in that and being able to broaden the reach. But you want to make sure that you're really following up with those people and that you're personally reaching out to those people who maybe gave at the event last year, because you want to make sure that you're renewing their support. It's easier for people to, if things come up, it's easier for people to just not attend an online event because they don't have as much skin in the game. So you want to make sure that you're reaching out to those people a couple days before. We hope that you can participate. We're going live on this day at this time, and then following up with them afterwards. Thank you so much for participating. I hope you were moved by the stories that we shared, and we hope that you'll renew your commitment. So making sure that you get that personal outreach to people that have supported you through that event in the past. And then appeals is similar to programming. So as you think about how you're, what you're doing right now in your organization, whether things are kind of continuing on as usual, or whether you've stepped up your services to meet your clientele in a different way, that is, again, what we would want to kind of assess before we send out an appeal. So I would not send out an appeal that you had planned, maybe at the start of the year, just as is. We really want to be communicating about the present time period and how that is impacting your organization. So you want to make sure that your messaging references the now in some way. So that might be, talking about the way that you've increased services to serve even greater need because of things that are happening in the community. It might mean we've had to shut our doors, but we're offering this amazing programming for free online through our social media. Here's some of the ways that we're keeping things going and continuing to meet our mission. And this is what we're doing. We hope that you'll, continue to support us so that we can offer this in person once, this is over, things like that. So you want to make sure that you're referencing the now, and that if you are in that space where you've had to pull back and not offer your services and programs in the same way, again, that is going to fewer donors, so that we're segmenting and targeting those communications to the people who are your top supporters, your really loyal supporters. And then another big thing right now is, do we send everything digital? Do we still send some things in print? And that is something that we're all kind of learning together. So obviously the volume of digital communications right now is very high. I think we all can kind of resonate with that. We're all getting a lot of emails, a lot of messaging through social media. So I think with digital, obviously it's easier to do from home if you're working remotely, and I think it's okay to have a digital strategy for sure. I think that needs to have more follow-up than you normally would. So you may have to send that 2 or 3 times instead of just maybe once that you would send that previously, to make sure that actually gets in front of somebody. I do think that if you have the ability, if you work with a print shop that is still operating, or if you can contact some different vendors and you have the ability to do something in print as well, we always suggest doing both digital and print. So if you're able to accomplish that right now, I do think it still makes sense to send both. We're still kind of analyzing the data of how people are responding to appeals right now, and how digital versus print is doing. But I think you have to find, obviously what you're able to do right now, maybe working outside of your normal facility, and then how your donors are used to interacting with you. So if they're not used to getting a digital appeal from you, it might really, really make sense for you to try to find a way to still send out a print appeal, at least to those top supporters and people who have given, last year and generally give to your appeals. So, and then just again to reiterate, because it's super important, follow-up is everything. So if you send out an appeal right now, you might be doing some personal follow-up with people. Again, trying to renew that support from the people who that's normally the thing that triggers their support every year, just because, there's people their attention is spread in a lot of different ways right now. And so to get in front of them, we want to obviously be thoughtful about how much we're communicating with people. We don't want to over communicate, but we should assume that they're not seeing every message that we're sending to them, just because they have so much that is coming in right now. And I'm going to turn it back over to Janet to start talking through the campaigns.
So because I'm not sure who all is on the line, I don't know whether any of you are in campaigns or in the planning process of a campaign right now, but I'm going to review how this time and a pandemic or a major disruption like this impacts how you communicate with your campaign donors. And essentially, you want to communicate directly with major donors who've already committed, those who have pending asks, and let them know what your choice is. If you are pausing your campaign, you still want to make sure you're connecting directly with those who have made big commitments. You'd want to go back to your lead donors, your foundations or individuals who've made significant gifts, and just thank them again for their support and let them know that we are, respectfully pausing our campaign fundraising right now so that we can stay focused on our operational needs. One of the things that we say at Kennari Consulting is that annual fund is king, and that is always going to take the lead over a campaign, and especially in times of crisis like this. However, it is the time to share or reshare your vision for the future. So you want to talk about the project and the why, why what we're doing is going to be important to the future of our organization, how the resulting campaign is going to move the needle on the issue that our organization addresses. Those are things that you can continue to talk about with the people who are in the know of your campaign, but you aren't going to talk about the campaign itself. So the difference between the project and the campaign: the project is what we're doing. We're building a new building, or we're adding on and doing major renovations. We're doing an endowment campaign. We're raising a whole lot of money to support a new program. Whatever the project is, what it is you're going to do. The campaign is the fundraising effort to support it. So now is not a great time to be talking about the campaign, the fundraising part of this, because people just aren't going to be as interested in that, but they will still care about how your organization's project is going to meet a future need or a current need. You want to be mindful of timing to announce a campaign publicly. So with regard to campaigns, where you are in the process makes a huge difference in how you would address a crisis situation like where we are right now. If you were in the planning phase, we haven't started a campaign yet, we're still planning it all out. So stay where you're at. It's a great time to continue the planning. Make sure that you've got all your components lined up that you really need. How does it fit with your overall strategies as an organization? Kind of build the communication tools, your case for support, your make sure the budget is really accurate. And again, you can be communicating with potential lead donors, folks who you think would be supporters, not asking them for money, but engaging their interest in the project. So that's the kind of communication you can do if you have not yet begun your campaign. The hardest place to be when we hit this kind of a situation, honestly, is in a feasibility study, because it's almost impossible to get someone to project what they think they might give to a campaign when they're in this crisis mode. So that is a place where if you might have to put a hard stop on getting ready to drop a feasibility packet. We're gonna wait till this settles out before we go out and ask people what we think they would do to support a project. If you're already in the fundraising, again, you may have to dial it back, but you want to continue to communicate with the people who already are aware of the project. Continue to speak with them about it and acknowledge that right now we're waiting out of respect for all of the other chaos that's happening and to keep our operations strong. And if you were about to launch the public phase, or just like that final fundraising effort, it's probably not a great time to do that either, because that could get confusing for people who want to support your operations. That's always challenging to delineate between the public phase of your campaign and timing it to not interrupt your annual fundraising. So if you were about to launch your public phase, we would probably say that's not a great communication to have right now. You're better off to try and complete your campaign through one-on-one conversations with donors who might make a little bit more significant gift. And then one of the things you also have to do is consider how your donors and your volunteers are impacted. If you're setting up a conversation with a donor prospect, just like you want to be asked, how are you doing? Ask them, because at this point, everybody has a COVID-19 story, right? And so it's helpful to get them comfortable to talk about you by letting them talk about themselves first. And that is just a good communication strategy for how to get the most out of your donor conversations right now, is let them speak first. Same thing with if you have a lot of campaign volunteers, if you have a campaign cabinet, campaign chairs, when you're talking to them, you want to make sure that you get a sense of, where they're at in this, and recognize that a co-chair who owns a small business that is completely shuttered now is going to have a different view of a co-chair that is already retired and is well established. Maybe they're a little concerned about the market, but they aren't really concerned about their own well-being. They know they're going to be fine. And recognize that those orientations are going to color how they feel about going out and asking anybody else for money. Same thing with any of your volunteers. Just be mindful of the fact that everybody is being impacted by this crisis, and everybody's going to have their own take on and their perspective on what it would be like to go out and talk to anybody else about raising money right now. And then communicating when unexpected challenges arise besides this one. So this obviously, broad disruptions like the COVID-19 situation we're in now. 9/11 was another broad disruption, not globally, although it did filter out into the rest of the world to some degree, but that was primarily an American phenomena. And then 2008's recession as well. There's different types of broad disruption that can get in the way of your fundraising, and how you communicate out as a result of those really has to take into consideration where essential needs are taking the lead. You want to stay calm and keep moving, and remember that it's temporary, and continue to speak about the critical needs of your project. How is this going to help? How is this going to help going forward, even if we're pausing right now? If you're going to be waiting on your campaign, then you do want to shift your communications and just revert back to that more general, here's the great things that our organization does. When it comes to internal challenges, a change of leadership is probably the most significant one that can be disruptive, and how you communicate with donors through that time frame is really important. You want to get a plan together. It's kind of that same three things. How is this going to impact the organization? Your donors want to know that you're going to continue to thrive as an organization, even if this is your founding executive director who's been there 25 years and everybody loves them, and oh my gosh, they're retiring. Is the organization going to fall apart? No, of course not. And so you need to make sure that you let people know the plan that you have for replacing them. We have hired a search firm and we're doing a national search, or we have been preparing an internal candidate that is going to just slide right into place. You want to be able to communicate out how the organization is going to be able to continue to thrive and grow. And you can also, from a fundraising perspective, take this opportunity to honor your retiring executive director with a special fundraising initiative. And the timing of how you roll that out is really essential too. Having all of the pieces in place. Maybe you have a challenge. Maybe there's a donor who's had a long and significant relationship with the executive director, they're willing to put a challenge gift out, and we're going to be putting money in to support a specific program or part of a named opportunity in a campaign that's going on, or it could be we're raising money into our endowment in their name. But you want to very carefully roll out those communications with a great plan for how that's going to help the organization going forward. The other thing that you want to do is make sure that you communicate this upcoming change of leadership to your top donors, pretty soon, because you don't want them to hear it from somewhere else in the community. So, that the rollout of, who gets to hear this first. So obviously on the inside, your staff and board all has to know all of the information, but then you want to go and talk directly to your supporters. If you have an angel donor particularly, you want to get them involved right away. And communicating with internal audiences. So whether you're in a campaign or not, when you're in some time of crisis, pandemic, upheaval, sudden loss of funding for one reason or another, it's important that you sequence the rollout of your information, and that if you want people to continue to be advocates and ambassadors for you, you have to make sure they have the information that they need to feel comfortable talking about it. So you want to have your board, volunteers, and partners well informed. Develop some talking points. Really, here's what's happening. Here are the specifics of how our organization is impacted and how we are addressing it. And then share those talking points with your board, your volunteers, and your partners, because you want them to feel comfortable talking about what's going on. One of the reasons probably the biggest reason your board members or other volunteers, excuse me, aren't good ambassadors is that they feel they aren't well enough informed. I don't want to talk about it because I might not know the right information and I don't want to say the wrong thing. So knowing that these situations that we're in like this are fluid, you may have to continuously update those talking points and just continue to share them out with the people who would be potential spokespersons, or just generally talking about you in the community. You want them to be able to feel comfortable with that. And then in terms of that sequencing, make sure you work from the inside out. You have your board and staff first, has to know what's going on, and then move out to your donors, your major donors first, key volunteers for your organization, and then your other donors and community at large. Just think about who's going to be impacted by this and make sure that people get the right information at the right time. The worst thing that can happen is that a board member hears about this from somebody else in the community. So I can't emphasize enough the importance of making sure that they are the most up-to-date people in your list of potential spokespeople. I'm going to hand it then over to Troy to talk about some of the Better Business Bureau's perspective on this.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you, Sarah. One of the things we really want to talk about is communicating with trust, making sure that you are seen as that trustworthy organization and that trustworthy person within the organization as you communicate out the changes that are taking place within your nonprofit. When people think about the Better Business Bureau, often they think about businesses, but we also work with charities and nonprofits a lot. Our Wise Giving Alliance has put together 20 standards of charity accountability. This is all about transparency and honesty. We want nonprofits to be able to share what they are and what they do. So everything from finances to the board makeup to the board policies that show that when donors come to you, you have the things in place to be that trustworthy location for that donor money. Now, several of those 20 standards take additional relevance right now in a time of crisis, and we're going to talk about a couple of those. The first one here has to do with something that you just heard from with the board. If you could advance to the next slide, please, Sarah. And it has to do with engaging your board in an honest and upfront way. Your board helps operate your nonprofit. They have a lot of say in a lot of things that happen. So being honest and upfront with them is really going to help you make good decisions about where things go within your organization. And as was said earlier, they really need to be your biggest supporters. They need to be able to be out there helping you with the communication that you're doing to donors and to the community. The last thing you want is your board members who are known by other people to get a question for somebody and the answer is, I don't know what they're doing. Board members need to be involved. So communicating with them honestly and upfront is critical. Let them know what's going on internally and let them help you. Let those board members help you make those tough decisions, bounce stuff off them. They really can be a good sounding board. Oftentimes, if you're a leader at the top, there's an old saying, it's kind of lonely at the top. These board members are the people who are there that can help you as you have questions or need to bounce things off of. And that goes to one of our charity standards about board oversight. Board of directors are supposed to have oversight over the nonprofit. So keeping them informed and letting them help you really helps with that standard and that board oversight as a true partner to you and your organization. The next thing we want to talk about is when it comes to soliciting and talking to your external audiences, talking to the community and to your donors. You need to do it in an honest manner. So we've talked about at the start of this, doing so in a way that is authentic, but isn't at all deceitful. You want to make sure that when everything is done at the end of your communication, they are looking at you as an honest person who has the best interests of your organization and that donor's money at heart. So make sure that whatever you're saying is true and trustworthy. Be transparent. You'll see in that video when we send this out, the guy from Marriott really does a great job of laying out the situation that they have, but doing it in a way that's not alarming and is honest about some troubled times ahead, but very transparent about how they're going to work through that. And the more you can say, the more transparent you can be with your donors in the community, the more they're going to trust you when it comes time to give. That goes to our charity standard 15, and I've written it on there, but basically all of your materials, all of your solicitations need to be accurate and truthful. So going through and double checking that the messaging you're doing really is an honest broker of where you stand. And then another thing that's critical at a time like this is donor privacy and protecting that donor privacy. We are in a workplace right now where lots of us are working remote. We have different systems operating and accessing computers back at the home office, databases. Making sure that that information is protected is critical to you and to your donors for that trust. It's never a good time to have a security breach. But right now, if a donor finds out that you somehow had a problem that led to their information getting out, maybe their credit card information or personal information, that is really going to damage your trust level with them. So making sure that you and your organization are taking the steps needed to protect your information and your donors' information is key. And then I do want to take a moment. One of the things you want to do is make sure that you're positioned to show donors in the community that you are a transparent organization. So we do have our charity review program, which is completely free. We have those 20 standards. The review process, it takes a little bit of time. There's some prep work to put together with your financials and your board makeup and things. But once you get that together, we go through, and if you meet all 20 standards, you'll be recognized as an accredited charity at bbb.org and at give.org, which is the website for the Wise Giving Alliance at a national level. So when donors come looking for you, they will see that you meet these 20 standards, that you are an accredited charity, and that's something you can hold up as you go out and communicate to donors that you've got this extra seal. And then while the review process is free, to be an accredited business or nonprofit is free, to be an accredited nonprofit is free by meeting these 20 standards. If you want to use that accredited charity seal in your solicitations, in your messaging to donors in the community, on your social media pages, on your website, in your annual report, basically anywhere you might want to show that accredited charity seal, there's a licensing fee that comes to that. I can walk you through that. It's a small licensing fee on a scale based off of your financials. We try not to make it real expensive for you, but there is some cost that goes into this. Any questions at all, you can contact me. My contact is there. We'll be sending this out as well. But this is a great way for you as communicating, especially as a free option, to show that you are transparent to your donors and to the community. So with that, I do want to take any questions. If you have them, please type them into the questions section and we will get to them. And while we wait to see if any questions come up, I'll turn it back over to Sarah and Janet and see if there's any other thoughts or information they want to change while we see if there's any questions that come up.
This is Janet, and I guess what I would say really is, I didn't mention this when I referenced my work at Kennari, but one of the things that I also do is work with any new clients that we have to assess their readiness to apply for accreditation through the Better Business Bureau. And I would say that it is a really great program. All of the 20 standards are helpful and add value to your organization from an integrity perspective. And so I encourage any of the nonprofits who are on the webinar today, if you haven't already done that, it is a great program and it's worth doing. So there's my pitch for the charity review program.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It doesn't look like we have any questions, so we'll go ahead and wrap this up with any final thoughts and parting words here. I don't know, Janet, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for attending and for considering the importance of how you communicate with your donors and the community, your stakeholders. It is, these are challenging times, and I think that staying calm, you know, and being accurate, being flexible, and continuing to update your communications as the circumstances change really are the overlying points, I guess, that I would want to make right now. Sarah, what would you add?
Yeah, I would just say that, you know, in terms of, we've been putting together some additional resources like this, you know, communicating right now, and then some of the other challenges that you might be facing at this time. So you can find those on our website and on our Facebook page at Kennari Consulting. I'd encourage you, you know, if you're looking for more resources, you can always look at those, but then certainly feel free to reach out to us. You know, anybody on our team as a starting point. If you're wading through this and you've just got some questions, or you're experiencing some different barriers, please feel free to, you know, contact us as a resource. We really want to make sure that our nonprofit community comes through this strong, and that all of the organizations that the community relies on and loves make it through this. So thanks so much for taking time with us today.
And I want to thank Janet and Sarah for joining us from Kennari Consulting and talking through some of these things. All of the nonprofits in our community are looking at some challenges and what the world looks like and how to communicate their relevance at this time. And making sure that they have the resources needed is critical. So thank you for joining us in this. And from a Better Business Bureau standpoint, just want to make sure that as you communicate with donors, with the community, with your board, and with your staff, you're doing it from a point of transparency and trust. And that really will go far, both in the short term and in the long term. Thank you for coming, and have a great day.